The phone booth at the Citgo station on Route 11 outside Wytheville, Virginia, was the last one in Wythe County. It stood at the edge of the parking lot like a relic, a glass and aluminum rectangle that had been installed in 1994 and that the station owner hadn't removed because removing it cost money and ignoring it cost nothing. The phone itself had been disconnected in 2019. The handset still hung on the cradle, but the line was dead, the coin slot sealed with a piece of duct tape, the phone book gone, the overhead light burned out. Nobody used it. Nobody had used it in years. It existed the way old infrastructure exists in rural Virginia. Present, functionless, too much trouble to tear down, accumulating rust and memory in equal measure. Clay, ratchet. Mosley noticed the girl inside it at 8:47 on a Saturday evening in late October because he'd pulled into the Citgo to top off his tank, and the phone booth was in his headlight beam, and there was a shape inside it that shouldn't have been there. He was 44 years old, 6'1", 265 pounds, and he'd been turning wrenches since he was 14 years old, first in his father's two-bay garage in rural Retreat, then at 3 different dealerships across Wythe and Smith counties, and for the last 12 years at his own shop, Mosley Transmission and Driveline, a 4-bay operation on Route 11 south of Wytheville, where he rebuilt transmissions by hand, every gear, every synchro, every valve body, the kind of work that most shops farmed out to remanufacturers, and that Clay did himself because his hands understood gear ratios the way musicians understand intervals, by feel, by sound, by the vibration that tells you whether the mesh is right or wrong. His beard was reddish-brown and thick, reaching his chest, with a small wrench pendant woven into the right side on a leather cord, a miniature open-end wrench, 10 mm, the size that every mechanic loses and every mechanic replaces, and that Clay wore as a reminder that the smallest tools do the most critical work. His forearms were sleeved in ink. His left arm carried a cutaway transmission rendered in photorealistic detail, every gear and shaft and bearing visible as though the skin had been peeled back to reveal the machinery underneath, the input shaft running from his wrist to his elbow with the gear clusters meshing in sequence. His right arm was an engine block sleeve, a cross-section of a small block Chevy 350 from intake to oil pan, pistons, and connecting rods, and the crankshaft visible in anatomical detail, with his shop's name arched across the top of his bicep. His knuckles were tattooed in block letters, gear on the left, mesh on the right, because a transmission works when the gears mesh and fails when they don't, and Clay believed the same was true of people. He wore a black leather vest with the dogwood MC center patch, a dogwood blossom with 4 petals, and a pistol made of crossed wrenches, his historian diamond, and a small oil pressure gauge pin on his breast pocket that had come from the dashboard of a 1971 Chevelle SS he'd restored when he was 22, and that he considered the finest thing his hands had ever built. Subscribe to Asphalt Angels and hit that notification bell, because this story starts with a disconnected phone and a girl who wasn't making a call, and by the end, you'll understand that sometimes the safest place a child can find is a glass box with a deadline and a burned-out light. The Dogwood MC had been founded in 2013 by Clay and 5 other mechanics and gearheads in Wythe County, men who worked on engines during the week and rode them on the weekend. The club had grown to 17 members across Wythe, Smith, and Bland counties, all of them men who understood machines, mechanics, fabricators, body men, the hands that kept Southwest Virginia's trucks and cars and equipment running. The club's philosophy was automotive: diagnose before you repair. Don't start pulling parts until you know what's wrong. Applied to people, this meant listen before you act, observe before you intervene, and understand that the noise someone's making isn't always where the problem is. Clay pulled up to pump 3. He was on his 2018 road glide, coming back from a Saturday evening ride through the mountains with two other Dogwood members, Lug and Cam, who had split off at the Route 11 junction to head home to Bland County. He shut the pump off, hung the nozzle, and turned to get his receipt, and his eyes crossed the parking lot to the phone booth, and the headlight of a sedan pulling in from Route 11 swept across the glass and lit up what was inside. A girl. Small. Maybe 9 or 10. Sitting on the floor of the phone booth with her knees pulled to her chest and her back against the glass wall and her arms wrapped around her shins. She was wearing a sweatshirt, oversized, gray, the hood up, and leggings and sneakers that were wet at the toes. She was not standing. She was not using the phone. She was sitting in a disconnected phone booth at a gas station at 8:47 on a Saturday night in October, in the dark, because the phone booth light was burned out, using the glass walls as a room. Clay didn't walk to the phone booth. He walked inside the Citgo first. The cashier was a man named Roy, who'd worked the Saturday night shift for 6 years, and who Clay knew by name. "How long's that kid been in the phone booth?" Roy looked out the window. "Couple hours, maybe. I noticed her around 7. Figured she was waiting on a ride." "She make any calls?" "Phone's been dead for years. She's just sitting in there." "Anybody come looking for her?" "Nobody." 2 hours. A child had been sitting in a dead phone booth for 2 hours, and nobody had come looking for her, and nobody had walked over to ask why. If this story has touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Asphalt Angels. Because a girl chose a glass box with a dead phone as the safest place she could find, and the reason she chose it is the reason we need to talk about what safe means to a kid who doesn't have any. Clay walked to the phone booth. He didn't open the door. He stood outside it, the glass between them, and he knocked on the frame. One knock. Not loud. The knock of a man who approaches engines gently, because slamming a hood never fixed anything. The girl looked up. Her face was visible through the glass, round, pale, eyes wide, the expression of a child who'd been found, and was deciding whether being found was better or worse than being hidden. Clay sat down on the concrete outside the phone booth, cross-legged, on the ground. He put himself below her eye level. She was sitting on the floor of the booth, which was raised 6 inches off the parking lot, so by sitting on the concrete, he was looking up at her. He made himself smaller, 6'1", 265 pounds, and he folded himself onto the pavement and made himself small because the girl in the glass box was small and the geometry between them needed to match. "Phone doesn't work," he said through the glass. "Been dead for years." "I know," she said. Her voice was muffled by the glass, but audible. "I'm not trying to call anybody." "Then what are you doing in there?" "It has walls and a door, and the door closes. It's the only thing out here that has a door that closes." If you're watching this story, hit that hype button right now. It's free, takes 1 second, and helps these stories reach the people who need them. Now, back to the story. Clay sat on the concrete, and he heard that sentence, and it rearranged something inside his chest. A door that closes. That was what this child had been looking for. Not a phone, not a connection, not help in the way adults think of help, but a door. A physical barrier between herself and whatever was outside the glass. The phone booth wasn't a communication device. It was a room. The smallest room in Wythe County, 4 feet by 4 feet, with walls she could see through, and a door she could hold shut, and a space that was hers for as long as she sat in it. "What's your name?" "Lily." "Lily, I'm Clay. Why do you need a door that closes?" "Because the doors at home don't close." He took them off, the bathroom door and my bedroom door. He said doors cause problems. He said he needs to be able to see everywhere. There's no doors anymore, except the front door and the back door, and those are his doors. A man who removes interior doors. Clay sat on the concrete in a gas station parking lot, and he processed that information with the same systematic logic he used to diagnose a transmission: symptom, cause, result. A man removes the interior doors of a house, the bathroom door, a child's bedroom door. The stated reason is visibility. The actual reason is control. The result is a child who cannot close a door, who cannot change clothes without being seen, who cannot use the bathroom without being observed, who has no private space inside the house she lives in, and who has found a phone booth at a gas station, a glass box with a door that closes, and has claimed it as the only room she has. Who took the doors off? Rick. He's my mom's husband. He moved in when they got married last year. He said the doors were sticking and he was going to fix them, but he never put them back. He put them in the garage. I can see them in the garage. They're leaning against the wall, but he won't put them back. Does your mom know you're here? My mom went to work. She works at the hospital. She does night shifts on weekends. Rick is supposed to watch me, but Rick watches TV and drinks, and I don't like being in the house when there's no doors, and Rick is drinking because he walks around and he stands in my doorway, my door space, where my door used to be, and he just stands there. He doesn't say anything. He just stands there and looks, and then he walks away. And I can't. She stopped. Her arms tightened around her shins. She pressed her forehead against her knees. The sentence she couldn't finish was the sentence that Clay heard louder than any sentence she'd said. She couldn't be in a house without doors, with a man who stood in the spaces where the doors should be. Lily, I'm going to make some calls. The first call is to the police. The second call is to my friends, who are bikers like me. Nobody is going to open this door until you say it's okay. This is your room right now. Nobody comes in without your permission, okay? Okay. Is there family? Somebody who's not Rick and not your mom's house? My Aunt Denise. She lives in Marion. She has doors. If Asphalt Angels has become part of your week, consider joining the channel membership. Just a couple bucks a month keeps these stories coming. Links below. Now, back to the ending. Clay called Wythe County Sheriff's Dispatch at 9:04 p.m. He texted the Dogwood group chat. Citgo, Route 11 South, girl in the phone booth, 2 hours, no doors at home. Rick, need brothers. GPS pin. Lug responded first. Vice President, body shop owner. Turning around, 12 minutes. Then Cam, also turning around. Then Socket and Boar from Wytheville. Then Valve from Rural Retreat. 5 riders, 2 of them turning their bikes back toward the Citgo they'd passed 20 minutes earlier. 5 motorcycles in the lot within 15 minutes. 5 large bearded men in leather vests standing in the parking lot around a phone booth. Not surrounding it, orbiting it, keeping a perimeter of space between themselves and the glass that let Lily see them, but kept them at a distance that felt safe. Clay stayed on the ground. The girl stayed in the booth. The glass between them was a wall and a window at the same time. It separated and it connected, which is what all good walls do. Deputy arrived at 9:18 p.m. Female deputy, Wythe County had 3, named Jensen. She approached the phone booth and she sat on the ground next to Clay and she talked to Lily through the glass for 6 minutes before Lily opened the door. Not all the way. 4 inches. Enough to talk without the muffling. Enough to be heard without being exposed. Lily told Deputy Jensen what she'd told Clay. The doors. Rick standing in the doorways. The drinking. The watching. She told Jensen something she hadn't told Clay. Rick had a camera. A small security camera mounted in the hallway that faced her bedroom door space, the space where the door used to be. He'd told her mother it was for security. It pointed at a 10-year-old girl's bedroom that had no door. The sheriff's unit went to the residence at 9:40 p.m. The house was a ranch style on a quiet street in a subdivision west of Wytheville, the kind of street with mailboxes and basketball hoops and recycling bins at the curb, the kind of street where the problems are internal because the exteriors are maintained and the lawns are mowed and the cars are washed and nobody looks past the garage door because the garage door is clean. Richard Allen Sykes, 42, was on the couch. He was intoxicated, a bottle of Jim Beam on the coffee table, 2/3 empty, a tumbler with melted ice beside it. He told the deputy that Lily was in her room. The deputy asked him to show her the room. Sykes walked to the hallway and gestured at a doorway with no door, the hinge cutouts in the frame empty, the strike plate orphaned on the jamb with nothing to strike against. "Where's the door?" "Garage. They were sticking. I'm going to rehang them." "When did you take them down?" "Few months ago." The investigation determined it had been 11 months. The bathroom had no door. Lily's bedroom had no door. The master bedroom, Sykes and Shannon's room, had a door. It was the only interior door in the house. A small wireless security camera was mounted in the hallway, aimed directly into Lily's doorless bedroom, the lens at a height and angle that captured the full room, the bed, the changing area, the space where a child lives the private moments of her life. The 4 missing interior doors were in the garage, leaning against the wall exactly where Lily said they were. Hinges still attached, screws still in the hinges, ready to be reinstalled by anyone who intended to reinstall them, which Rick had never intended to do. The deputy photographed the camera. She photographed the empty door frames. She photographed the doors leaning in the garage. She photographed the hinge cutouts and the strike plates and the screw holes and the physical evidence of absence, because absence is evidence, because the thing that should be there and isn't tells you as much as the thing that shouldn't be there and is. Sykes was arrested on charges of child endangerment, voyeurism, and possession of surveillance equipment used in the commission of a crime against a minor. The camera's storage was seized. The contents of that storage are sealed, as they should be, because they belong to Lily and to the legal system, and to a courtroom where men like Sykes sit at a table and face the evidence of what they've done behind walls that have no doors. Aunt Denise drove from Marion, 40 minutes north on I-81, the kind of driving you do when the sentence you've just heard on the phone is, "Your niece has been sitting in a phone booth at a gas station for 2 hours because your sister's husband took the doors off the house." She arrived at the Citgo at 10:15 p.m. in a sedan that she'd parked so fast the front tire was on the concrete island. The phone booth door was open now. Lily was sitting on the floor of the booth with a blanket from Deputy Jensen's patrol car around her shoulders and a cup of hot chocolate from the Citgo that Roy, the cashier, had made for her and refused to charge for. Had, in fact, put a lid on it and a sleeve around it and handed it to Clay with the words, "For the little one," and then gone back behind his counter and called his own daughter, who was 32 and lived in Roanoke, and told her he loved her, which he hadn't done on a Saturday night in a while. Denise walked to the phone booth. She didn't reach in. She didn't grab. She crouched at the open door. The open door. The door that Lily had opened on her own terms, 4 inches at first, then wider, then all the way. And she held out her hand, palm up, fingers open, an invitation rather than a grasp, and she said, "My house has doors, Lily, every room, and they all have locks, and you get to lock every single one." Lily put her hand in Denise's hand. Denise pulled her gently to her feet and out of the phone booth and into the parking lot, where 5 bearded men in leather vests stood in the cold and watched a 10-year-old girl step out of a glass box into the open air for the first time in 2 hours and walk toward a car that would take her to a house with doors. The October air hit Lily's face, and she closed her eyes, and she breathed it. Outdoor air, unrestricted air, air that didn't have walls around it. And then she walked to the sedan, and Denise opened the back door, and Lily got in. Lily said, as Denise buckled her into the back seat, "Can we put a lock on mine? Not just a door, a lock. We'll put a deadbolt on it if you want." "I want." Denise smiled. It was the first smile in this story. It belonged to a girl who had just discovered that she had the right to want things, specifically the right to want a lock on a door, specifically the right to want a boundary that she controlled. The Dogwood MC of Wythe County, Virginia, now sponsors a program called Closed Door. In partnership with family shelters, churches, and social services across Wythe, Smith, and Bland counties, they provide and install interior door locks, keyed privacy locks for bedrooms and bathrooms, in homes identified by caseworkers as needing them. The program isn't about hardware. It's about the principle that a child has the right to close a door, and that the ability to close a door is not a privilege. It is a structural requirement of a life that has boundaries. Clay shows up to the installations himself, 6'1", 265 pounds, leather vest, wrench pendant in his beard, with a drill and a Schlage privacy lock, and 30 minutes of his Saturday, and he installs the lock and tests it and hands the key to the child and says, "This is your door. This is your key. Nobody opens it but you." Lily is 11 now. She lives with Denise in Marion, in a house on a quiet street with a porch and a garden and a dog named Bolt who sleeps at the foot of her bed. Her bedroom has a door. The door has a lock. The lock has a key. The key is on a lanyard around her neck that she wears at all times, even in the house, even when the door is open, because the key isn't about locking the door. It's about knowing she can. Her mother, Shannon, left Rick within a week of the arrest. She didn't pack. She loaded Lily's clothes into garbage bags and her own clothes into a suitcase, and she drove to Denise's house in Marion, and she sat in the driveway for 10 minutes before she went inside, because sitting in the driveway meant she was still in transition, and transition is easier than arrival, because arrival means you've admitted where you've been. She's in therapy now. She visits Lily every Saturday. She brings takeout, and they eat on Denise's porch, and they don't talk about Rick, and they don't talk about the doors, and they don't need to, because the porch has a screen door, and the screen door has a latch, and Lily can hear it open and close, and the sound of a door working correctly is a sound she never gets tired of. Shannon told her therapist once, "He told me the doors were sticking. He told me he was going to fix them, and I believed him for 11 months. 11 months without a bathroom door, and I believed he was going to fix them. That's what they do. They make the insane sound temporary until temporary becomes permanent, and permanent becomes normal, and normal becomes the only thing you can see." Clay still stops at the Citgo on Route 11. The phone booth is still there. The station owner talked about removing it after the story got around town, said it was an eyesore, said it hadn't been useful since before smartphones, said it was taking up parking space. But Clay asked him to leave it. Not as a monument, but as a landmark, a marker that says this is the place where a girl found a room when her house didn't have one. Roy, the cashier, stuck a small dogwood blossom decal on the glass. Underneath it, "You can stop here." The light still doesn't work, but on Saturday nights, when the Citgo lot is lit by the canopy fluorescence and the Route 11 traffic paints headlight beams across the parking lot, the phone booth catches the light through its glass walls and glows faintly. A small bright box at the edge of a parking lot in rural Virginia that nobody uses for phone calls anymore, but that one girl used for the only thing that mattered, a door that closes. Clay parks next to it sometimes. He doesn't go inside. He sits on his bike and he looks at the glass, and he sees the ghost of a gray hoodie and a pair of knees pulled to a chest, and he understands, the way mechanics understand, that sometimes the most important thing in a machine isn't what's there, it's what's missing. A door, a lock, the 4 inches of space between closed and open. The difference between a house and a home is hardware, and the hardware a child needs most is the hardware that lets her shut the world out when the world is standing in her doorway, watching. Be the one who knocks. Thank you for watching this story. If it reminded you that a door isn't just a door, it's a boundary, a right, a wall between a child and whatever she needs a wall against, please share it. Subscribe to Asphalt Angels for more stories proving that sometimes the rescue isn't a ride, or a fight, or a chase. It's a knock on a glass wall, and the sentence, "This is your room. Nobody comes in without your permission." Tell us in the comments, does every room in your house have a door?